In the middle of a vast, dry wasteland, where the sun hung low and heavy like a burning coin in the sky, an uneasy silence had settled over the planet. The kind of silence that only arrives after war, after surrender, after the last of the rebels have either vanished or given up. The world beneath the ships had once been Earth's last free colony, until the day the sky cracked open and she arrived. They called her the emissary. Tall, graceful, and terrifying in her beauty, she wasn't, like the other invaders. Her skin shimmered a cool shade of blue, her armor forged from some unknown alloy that glowed faintly with alien runes. She walked among machines and soldiers like a queen, surrounded at all times by a dozen elite guards, silver-clad beings with no faces, no names, and no mercy. And though she never spoke in a language anyone could recognize, her presence communicated everything. She was power, she was dominance, and she was absolutely untouchable. The humans had learned that quickly. Entire villages had disappeared overnight after trying to approach her. Scientists, soldiers, diplomats, all tried, all failed. Some simply vanished. Others were found later, motionless in the dust, their bodies still warm but their minds erased. Rumors spread like wildfire, that the emissary could reach into your thoughts, that looking into her eyes for too long was a death sentence, and that she didn't just conquer planets, she bent wills. And yet, despite the fear she inspired, something strange was happening. Something quiet. People whispered of moments, fleeting, almost impossible, when she seemed to hesitate, when her eyes lingered a little longer on the children of the camps, when she paused at the sight of a dying tree, when, just for a heartbeat, she didn't look like a destroyer. But no one dared to test that theory, no one except one human. He wasn't a hero, he wasn't a soldier. He didn't have weapons, or power, or even a plan. His name was Marco, 26 years old, a mechanic from the edge of the resistance zone, just trying to survive the occupation like everyone else. He fixed broken farming bots in exchange for food, kept to himself, and never looked up when the patrols passed by, until the day she came to his sector. It was supposed to be a routine inspection, a show of force. The emissary descended in her massive ship, flanked by her silent guards. The skies turned violet with the glow of their engines. People dropped to their knees. Some ran. Marco didn't. He stood by the side of a collapsed irrigation unit, staring up at the woman who had become more myth than real. She walked past him, close enough to see the fine lines along her cheekbones, the way her eyes shimmered like the surface of deep ocean water. The guards moved to block Marco, but she lifted her hand and they stopped. In that moment, everything changed. Marco didn't know why he stepped forward. He didn't know what drove him to reach out, not in anger, not in defiance, but in something else. Curiosity, connection. Maybe it was the way she looked at the dead soil, or maybe it was just the way she didn't flinch when he met her eyes. His hand reached out, slowly, cautiously, and brushed the edge of one of her thick, golden braids. Gasps echoed from the nearby workers. The guards tensed. Their weapons began to hum with energy, but she didn't move. She stood still, staring at the human hand that now touched her, not with fury, but something deeper. Something uncertain. In the seconds that followed, the desert world held its breath. Everyone expected death. An explosion. A scream. Anything. Instead, the emissary whispered a word. Just one. No translator could catch it. No one knew what it meant. But Marco saw the flicker of something in her eyes. Not rage. Not confusion. Recognition. From that moment forward, nothing was the same. Whispers spread across the camps that a human had touched her and lived, that she had let him, that the untouchable had been touched. It was blasphemy to the guards, treason to the alien code. The emissary disappeared for days. Her ships hovered silently, no longer advancing, no longer retreating. Her soldiers patrolled more aggressively, but their movement seemed uncertain. Like they were waiting for something, and Marco, he became a target. The resistance wanted to use him. The aliens wanted to destroy him. The people wanted answers. But Marco had none. All he knew was that he had looked into her eyes and had seen something he never expected. Loneliness. Was it possible? Could the most feared figure in the galaxy, the one they called Conqueror, feel something as human as longing? He couldn't forget the look on her face, the way she let him touch her, the words she spoke, and now he had a choice: run, hide, or follow her. But what lay ahead wasn't just dangerous, it was impossible, because the emissary was untouchable, and yet, somehow, one human had reached her. What would happen if he tried? Again? The desert wind picked up. The ships above them began to stir. The guards turned their heads toward him in unison, as if summoned by a silent signal. And somewhere in the heart of the flagship, she was watching, waiting. For him. Marco didn't sleep that night. He lay on the floor of a storage container converted into shelter, eyes fixed on the rusted ceiling above. The hum of the alien ships echoed faintly in the sky, like thunder that never quite arrived. Outside, the camp had grown quieter than usual. People kept their distance. Even those who once shared food or traded spare parts now crossed to the other side of the path when they saw him coming. Some were afraid. Others seemed angry. He couldn't blame them. After what he'd done, what he was now known for, they had every reason to worry. He'd touched her. He had done the one thing no one dared to do, the one thing believed impossible. And now no one knew what it meant. Not him, not them, maybe not even her. Marco tried to tell himself it didn't matter, that she would forget about it, that this would all blow over. But deep down he knew it wasn't over. Something had changed. And it hadn't just changed the way people saw him. It had changed something in her. 3 days passed without another sighting of the emissary. Her ship remained high in the clouds, unmoving, casting a strange purple glow over the sands below. The guards patrolled the camp more often now, their movements sharper, more alert. They didn't speak. They never spoke. But Marco could feel it. They were watching him. Every time he turned a corner, he felt their eyes. Every time he stepped outside, at least one would subtly shift in his direction. Then, early one morning, the silence broke. A loud hum shook the sky. Not violent, but steady, rhythmic. The kind of sound that made your heart pound without knowing why. Everyone ran outside to look. The emissary's ship was descending, slowly, for the first time in days. A great cloud of dust spiraled beneath it as it approached the dry earth outside the camp's perimeter. No one moved. No one even breathed. A door opened along the side of the ship, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Then she stepped out. No guards flanked her this time. No soldiers. Just her. Marco felt his chest tighten. He was standing beside the old water tank, trying to stay in the shadows. But her eyes scanned the camp like a spotlight, and then stopped. On him. She raised a hand slowly and pointed. There was no mistaking it. She wanted him. The guards didn't move to stop him as he approached. Neither did the people. They just watched, stunned, as Marco crossed the empty space between the edge of the camp and where she stood. It felt like walking into the center of a storm, not knowing whether it would pass or swallow him whole. When he was close enough, she looked at him, not with the cold authority he'd expected, but something else, something heavier. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet but clear. You are not like the others. It wasn't a question, and though her accent was strange, her words were perfect. You speak English? Marco asked, stunned. I speak what I need to, she replied. They stood there for a moment, two beings from different worlds, facing each other in the dust. And then she turned and began walking, not back into the ship, but away, toward the hills. Without speaking, Marco followed. They walked in silence for a long time, far from the camp. The farther they went, the more uneasy he felt. The land was open and exposed. If the guards decided to strike, no one would hear him scream. But she kept walking ahead without looking back, her braids swaying like pendulums, her posture steady and unreadable. Eventually, she stopped at the edge of a dried-up riverbed. This was once full of water, she said. Now it is dust. Marco looked around. Yeah, it used to feed the fields, before the occupation. She turned toward him, and for the first time, he saw something that unsettled him more than her armor or her presence. He saw sadness. This planet resists us, she said softly. It fights, not with weapons, but in silence, in death, like it wants us to leave. Marco frowned. Maybe it does. She looked at him, then at the sky. We don't understand your kind. You fight even when you know you'll lose. You protect what is broken. You refuse to surrender even when surrender is the only outcome. Maybe, Marco said, his voice low. Or maybe we just know some things are worth protecting. She studied him for a long moment, then asked, Why did you touch me? The question caught him off guard. I don't know, he said honestly. You looked alone. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she knelt and touched the cracked ground with her fingers, as if listening to the earth itself. The gesture was oddly human. I was not made to be touched, she said. I was made to rule. Marco stepped closer carefully. But you didn't stop me. No, she said, standing again, and I still don't know why. A gust of wind passed between them. Somewhere far behind, the distant hum of her ship pulsed like a heartbeat. She looked up at the sky. They are watching us now, my people. They do not understand what I am doing. They will act soon. What does that mean? Marco asked. It means your time is short, she replied, her tone sharper now. They will not allow this connection. Marco felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. Then, why bring me here? Because I need to understand, she said. You are not the first to try to reach me, but you are the first I did not destroy. That's not exactly comforting. She almost smiled. Almost. Before either of them could speak again, a flash of light lit up the horizon. One of the smaller patrol ships was approaching fast, kicking up a storm of sand behind it. She turned, her eyes narrowing. They're coming for you, she said. You must leave. Come with me, Marco said without thinking. But she shook her head. I can't. Not yet. The patrol ship landed hard in the dust, and 3 guards stepped out, taller than usual, with markings along their armor that glowed red instead of blue. They didn't speak. They just advanced. The emissary stepped between them and Marco, her voice low but forceful. He is under my protection. One of the guards raised a weapon. She didn't flinch. Marco backed up, uncertain what to do. It was clear these weren't normal soldiers. They weren't here to take him. They were here to eliminate him. The tension in the air thickened. The guard didn't lower his weapon, and then, in a flash of movement, she turned her head just enough to whisper to Marco, "Run." But Marco didn't move. Not yet. Marco's legs were frozen. Every instinct screamed for him to turn and run back toward the camp, toward safety, if such a thing still existed. But something stronger held him in place. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, steady and unwavering. Maybe it was the realization that this moment, right now, mattered more than survival. The 3 guards advanced with mechanical precision, red light pulsing from the seams of their armor. These weren't the usual patrols. These were something worse. The emissary stood tall between them and Marco, her presence commanding, but even he could feel the shift. She was no longer completely in control. Something deeper was happening, something within her own ranks. The lead guard raised his arm. A narrow beam of light formed above his wrist, aimed not at Marco but at her. No, she said, her voice cold and firm. The beam didn't drop. For a moment, there was no movement. Just the sound of wind and the quiet hum of alien technology. waiting to be triggered. Then the second guard spoke, his voice synthesized and hollow. "Your directive has been compromised." "I gave no such order," she replied. "You no longer speak for the Dominion," the guard responded. Marco's heart dropped. Dominion. That was the name no one dared say out loud. The name behind the ships, behind the war, behind her. Now, it had a voice. A command. And that command was turning on her. The emissary didn't back down. "Leave him. Return to the command vessel." The guards didn't move. Suddenly she turned and grabbed Marco's wrist. "We need to go." Together they ran, not back to the camp, but away from it, into the rocky hills beyond the riverbed. The guards followed, but slower, as if unsure whether to pursue or report. The emissary moved quickly, navigating the terrain with inhuman grace. Marco stumbled behind her, his breath burning in his throat. "Where are we going?" he shouted. "There's a place they can't follow," she said. Behind them, the sound of the patrol ship grew louder. Marco didn't ask what she meant. He just kept running. Eventually, they reached a narrow canyon, the kind used long ago for mining routes before the war. She led him into a crevice so tight they had to move sideways. And when they emerged on the other side, the noise of the ship had vanished. The rock walls were high, casting the ground into shade. It was cooler here, still. Like a forgotten pocket of the world, untouched by everything outside. They paused to catch their breath. Marco leaned against the stone, watching her. She didn't look tired, but she did look changed. That calm, unreadable face was cracking, just slightly. "Tell me what's going on," he said. She hesitated. Then, quietly, she spoke. "The Dominion no longer trusts me." "Why?" "Because of you." Marco shook his head. "I don't understand." "You weren't supposed to survive," she said. "I was sent here to lead, to eliminate resistance, but instead I hesitated. I chose to see you." Marco didn't know what to say. His mind raced with questions, but the urgency in her voice silenced them. "The Dominion watches everything," she continued. "They monitor emotions, they track decisions. The guards are not just soldiers, they are enforcers. If I diverge from protocol, they are programmed to correct me. Or replace me, replace you." She looked away. "There are others, clones, echoes, versions of me that still follow orders without question. I was the first to deviate." "Why now?" Marco asked. She looked directly at him. "Because of you." Those words didn't make him feel proud. They made him afraid. Back at the camp, tension was building too. Whispers turned to arguments. People debated whether Marco had betrayed them, whether he had put all of them in danger by getting close to her. Some still believed he was lying, that the moment with the emissary had been staged. Others were terrified that it was real, and what it might mean for all of them. Among them was Juno, Marco's closest friend, and a former medic turned resistance courier. She hadn't spoken to him since the day of the encounter. But now, with Marco missing and alien ships growing more active overhead, she began searching for answers. She tracked his last known direction, slipping past patrols and scanning the cliffs where the ships didn't fly. She didn't know if she was looking for him or for the truth. Meanwhile, far above, inside the Dominion flagship, something else stirred. A council of unseen figures reviewed Marco's image again and again. His face, his hand reaching out, his hesitation. They studied the emissary's reaction, the way she had paused, the way she had protected. "Emotional contamination," one of the voices said. "Suggest removal and reset," said another. But one figure didn't speak, just watched. And waited. Back in the canyon, night fell. The emissary and Marco sat in silence by a small fire, made from broken drone parts that sparked just enough light to see by. She looked less like a conqueror in the low light. Her armor still glowed faintly, but her face looked tired, human. Marco broke the silence. "What happens if they take you?" "They won't take me," she said. "They'll erase me." He didn't respond. She added, "And they'll erase you." Marco leaned forward. "Then we have to fight." Her eyes met his. "You don't understand." This isn't a war we can win with weapons. They control thought. They rewrite history. They erase what they fear. Then give them a reason to fear us, he said, his voice firm. For a long time she said nothing. Then, there's a place, deep beneath the old mines. Before the war, your kind found something buried there. A signal. That's where the Dominion first heard your world. It's why they came. Marco frowned. You're saying we called them? Not on purpose, but yes. What kind of signal? Something ancient, she said. Something not even they understand. He looked at her. And you do? She nodded once. I think it's calling again. The fire crackled softly between them. Marco's voice was barely above a whisper. What if it's calling me? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and gently touched his hand. This time it was her choice. The contact was brief, but it sent a chill through him. Not fear, not pain, recognition. Somewhere out there, war machines were preparing, ships were arming, soldiers were moving, and something ancient beneath the ground was waiting to be found. But for now, in this quiet canyon, a human and the one who was never meant to be touched sat side by side, both changed, both hunted, and neither truly understood what came next. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the ancient signal pulsed again, stronger this time, more focused. It wasn't just noise anymore. It had rhythm, intention. Marco felt it not only in his ears but in his chest, like a second heartbeat. The emissary stood slowly, her eyes turned toward the mountain's dark silhouette in the distance. That's where it begins, she said softly. They moved at dawn, walking through dry riverbeds and jagged trails until they reached the old mining shafts. The entrances were collapsed, but the emissary scanned the rock, then reached out with a strange device that shimmered in her hand. Within seconds, the debris shifted and parted, revealing a narrow tunnel leading deep underground. Marco glanced, back at the desert sky, still quiet but only for now. They had little time. As they descended, the air grew colder, the walls humming with the same pulse from the signal. There were carvings etched deep into the stone, not by human hands. Symbols that seemed to move slightly when looked at too long. Marco ran his fingers across one of them and felt a faint warmth like memory. The emissary watched him closely. You were chosen long before you ever saw me, she said. Marco frowned. Chosen by what? By whatever left this behind, she answered. Long before the Dominion, long before us. Deeper inside, they found a vast chamber with a platform at its center. It glowed softly with the same light that pulsed through the stone. The emissary stepped forward and placed her hand on the platform. The walls lit up instantly, casting stories and moving images. Worlds collapsing, stars falling, and beings, not like any they had known. In one of the scenes, Marco saw Earth, his Earth, sending out a radio signal decades ago. Then, a response. Then, silence. Until now. Marco walked toward the platform. It felt familiar, like something he'd seen in a dream. He placed his hand next to hers. A wave of light shot through the room, not blinding, but deep and resonant. He gasped, not from pain, but from clarity. Memories flooded in, not his own. The signal wasn't calling him. It had been waiting for someone who could feel, who could understand, not dominate. The emissary was watching him now, not as a soldier, but as something else entirely. You've activated the echo, she said. What does it mean? That the Dominion can no longer control what happens next. As they returned to the surface, the skies had changed. The ships were moving, fast. Patrols swarmed the hills. But something was different. The guards didn't descend. They hovered, silent, waiting. At the edge of the cliff, Marco stood tall, his hand still glowing faintly. The emissary beside him turned to face the sky. They've felt the change, she said. The echo disrupted their signal chain. They can't track or rewrite your memories anymore. He nodded. Then it's time. Back at the resistance camp, word had already spread. The sky had shifted, the drones faltered, and the fear that once held everyone silent was beginning to crack. Juno returned first, breathless from her search, and when she saw Marco and the emissary walking together down the ridge, something in her changed too. The crowd watched in silence, not in fear, but in awe. Marco stepped forward. "They are afraid," he said simply, "because we're not who they expected." The emissary followed, her voice calm, "And I'm not who they made me to be." In the days that followed, small uprisings broke out across nearby regions. The Dominion ships remained in the sky but didn't descend. Their surveillance systems were blind in pockets where the echo had spread. People began gathering near the signal points. They built fires, told stories, and remembered what it meant to feel, to hope. The emissary no longer gave commands. She listened. She walked among the people, asking questions, sitting with children, helping rebuild homes destroyed in the early attacks. Some still feared her, but most began to see her for what she really was. A witness, once a weapon, now something else. Marco stayed close, becoming a bridge between the two worlds. He had no desire to lead, but people looked to him anyway. He didn't speak with force. He just spoke with truth. The Dominion, sensing the shift, began to withdraw. Their ships hovered, further and further away, their energy signatures weakening. They hadn't lost through battle. They'd lost through disobedience from one of their own. Before they left, Marco and the emissary returned to the canyon one last time. The fire they once shared was now just blackened stone, but the memory stayed sharp. She stood at the same place where he had first touched her braid. "I was never supposed to be touched," she said, her voice distant. And yet that moment rewrote everything. Marco smiled. "Maybe the smallest things do." She looked at him with a softness he hadn't seen before. "What now?" He looked out at the horizon. "We build something new. Together." She nodded, then paused. "I'm not sure where I belong." "You belong here," he said. "Not because of what you were, but because of who you chose to become." She didn't reply, but for the first time she looked at the sky, not in anticipation of command, but as someone finally free to dream. The Dominion didn't return. The resistance slowly faded into a new kind of community. There were no more uniforms, no more speeches, just people and stories. Marco's story spread not as a legend but as a reminder that one moment of connection could change the course of history. And somewhere beneath the mountains, the signal remained. Quiet. Waiting. Not for war, not for control, but for another who could hear its pulse, another who would listen, because in the end, it wasn't strength that changed the future. It wasn't strategy or science. It was something much older, something human,